Yes, hello everyone. I hope you're doing well. Today we are going to have a discussion on argumentation. So in this presentation, we look at what arguments are, how can we apply the techniques of argumentation in our professional and even daily lives, and also what are the components of arguments, or what are the parts or elements of arguments and things like that. So I hope that you find this presentation very insightful and that it can also guide you in how you will be engaged in argumentation in different contexts. So when we talk about argumentation, we are basically referring to the act of presenting and defending a particular position through the use of reasoning and evidence. So this is to say, if there is an issue uh, that is fronted for debate or for discussion, you will either agree with that position, or you actually disagree with that very position. And therefore, your disagreement should be anchored on proper reasons, and you should present evidence for your kind of reasoning. So, if you do that, if you are defending a particular position uh, while giving evidence uh, for that position, then you're engaged in what we call argumentation. So argumentation is actually very good to engage in, because it is through this argumentation that we can be able to bring people to our side. That is to say that we influence people such that they see things the way we want them to see them. Or we also we are in position uh, to enable them see things the way we see them. Okay. And then also, if we have difficulties or we have disagreements, when we use the techniques of argumentation, it means that we shall have dialogue, conducive dialogue, or productive dialogue that allows us to discuss our differences. Now, when you discuss your differences in a peaceful way, it allows both parties to understand one another, and that is good actually for emergence of new solutions to a deadlock that you have on an issue. Oh, sometimes you have a standoff on issues that you have not actually explained, that you have not actually taken time to discuss. So when we have a kind of argumentation, it helps you to narrow down where the differences that you have actually emanate from. What are the standpoints? And then it also allows you to generate new knowledge that you don't know about either side of the story. And then argumentation happens in a public sphere. This is to say that the public is continuously engaged in a discussion on issues to do with policy, issues to do with their welfare, and a lot of taxations, for example, education, health. So these are issues that actually affect every member of the society. And how these issues are handled is a great area of arguments. And therefore, argumentation allows the public to put forward their views. And this actually is very common in democratic societies, where everyone's view is respected. There is freedom of speech. That means that people are able to put out their arguments, and then the public can actually evaluate these arguments. So it is one of the tenets of a free democracy, where there is freedom to argue. And sometimes these arguments may be against the sitting government, but that should not be a reason for why people should not be allowed to argue, even if the positions that they stand for are against the ruling government. Um, Argumentation allows you to look at issues critically. So your critical thinking abilities are enhanced. This is because you learn the skills of evaluating evidence and then being able to make your own conclusions based on the evidence that has been provided to you. So it is very good in enhancing critical thinking, and critical thinking in itself allows one to become a better decision maker. But we also learned how to communicate to individuals. So if you have a standpoint on a particular matter, you can communicate your standpoint if very well or appropriately if you understand the skills of argumentation. The structuring of your arguments is very important. And if you structure it very well, you are therefore actually communicating coherently and logically. And therefore, the other person can be able to understand your viewpoint. And then we also talk about issues to do with solving problems. You can only solve problems if you gather data that surrounds that problem. And then if you gather this data, you should be in position to actually evaluate it critically. And then when you do this analysis or this evaluation, then you can be able to solve problems. So problems sometimes exist because we don't have enough information about them. But if you look at information from either side or from competing sides, then we shall be able to solve these problems in a better way. So some people have misconceptions about argumentation. They think arguing is not actually a good thing. It is usually tainted with a negative connotation, but not really. Argumentation is actually good and productive, as we have seen, and also as we shall see in the next few slides. Some people confuse what facts are and their opinion. So opinions and facts are actually different. And then now we live in an era in which um, uh, social media is the media of communication and socializing with different people. Um, Now, the effect of this social media platform has been that we tend to become friends on social media to people that have the same kind of thinking like ours. And therefore, we kind of narrow the kind of arguments that we actually find on our social media platforms or feeds. And therefore, we are not engaged in a lot of argumentation even on social media. So social media uh, tends to narrow the space. So in our daily lives, we apply argumentation. For example, in debates, these debates can be at a community level, at a town council level, at a county level, and this can actually be in a way. Is disrupting, yeah? All right, so debates can be parliamentary debates. It can be local council debates or town hall debates, whatever they are. It can be debates in schools or institutions of higher learning. So the skills that you actually use in this kind of debates come from argumentation. And then also in your practice, for example, if you're working in a hospital, um, you use what you call evidence-based practice. This is to say that um, For any action that you actually take, you you gather enough evidence to support the actions that you're going to take. So, for example, if you have a patient and the patient has a particular condition, but you need to make a decision on how you're going to actually treat this patient. So you may need to look for evidence from studies to evaluate the effectiveness of each of the alternatives that you actually have. So the use of evidence and evaluating the kind of evidence. So the use of evidence is actually very, very important because it supports actions. Also, it helps in improving hypotheses and different theories. So we live in an information era. This means that we are always bombarded with information from different media houses, on social media, on TV, and different platforms. Now, not all information that we actually receive is actually very accurate. We need to have the skills to be able to evaluate this information and understand it better, such that we can actually act on it in an appropriate way. So evaluation of adverts, for example, evaluation of on whatever information is passed on social media or in mainstream media is very important. We have what we call disinformation and misinformation. This can actually harm people, and therefore it is very important that we understand the techniques of argumentation, reasoning, and even evaluating information such that we can um, uh, distinguish what is accurate and what is inaccurate, what is fake and what is genuine. And then we have lawyers who often engage in legal arguments. So they front legal arguments. They can base on evidence or they can base on legal precedents to make their case for whatever position that they hold. And then we have what we call the public sphere, is that citizens of a given country can gather and discuss matters that actually concern them. And this helps inform what we call public opinion. This actually flourishes very well, like for example, I say in democratic societies where people have the freedom to say and even participate in governance by giving in their opinion. So we have been talking about issues to do with argumentation, but what are these arguments? Arguments are statements uh, that are, or we can just say an argument is a set of statements, one being a conclusion and the other being a premise. Okay, so a premise supports the conclusion. Okay, or is the evidence for why a given conclusion has been reached. So, for example, if someone says today is Friday, Musa will not work. So the premise or the statement that is today is Friday is what you can say is a claim. And that claim can also be called a preposition, as we shall see. It should have, okay, it should have uh, the truth value. This is to say this statement is either right or false. So today is Friday. Because today is Friday, Musa will not work today. Um, so because of the fact that today is Friday, Musa will not be able to work. That is an argument because there is there are two things. There is a statement which is a claim, And then there's a statement which is basically a conclusion. And the conclusion in this case is that Musa will not be able to work. So a premise is basically the reason for why a given conclusion is made. And therefore, for every argument, there is at least a claim, okay, and then the evidence for that claim, and then the conclusion. So we can talk about arguments having claims or prepositions, um, and then the evidence, and then the logical reasoning part. And then we also have what we call counter arguments. So we'll look at this in details. Claims are statements that hold uh, truth value in them. Okay, so the statements can either be true or false. Okay, and then the premises is the evidence or the reasons that are put forward to back up the conclusion. So the conclusion is basically a further claim that is backed up by reasons or evidence. So these claims can be factual or inferential. Factual claims are those that can actually be proven. If you say the boiling point of water is 100 degrees centigrade, it means that you can go and test this out and you verify whether actually the boiling point of water is 100 degrees centigrade. So that is a fact. Okay, so it's a factual claim. You can go and disprove it. And then an inferential claim is one that one actually gets, though that is one that actually one derives from a conclusion. So, for example, if you have a data set, okay, you have data in front of you, what conclusions can you draw from the data? Okay, so the conclusions that you draw from this data are what you call differential claims. Okay, so the process of actually making of drawing conclusions based on the premises that we have is what we call inference. So how do we know the conclusions and how do we know the premises? Like you have a number of resources, or let us say written articles, or you listen to someone speaking, you listen to a speech, you want to know which arguments is the person actually making. So what claims do they have and what conclusions do they have? So we have what we call conclusion indicators and also premise indicators. Conclusion indicators include things like, so if you read an essay and then you see things like thus, therefore, hence, excuse me, it follows that we may conclude consequently. So these are indicators to statements that are going to be conclusive. Like these are indicators of a conclusion that is usually going to follow. And then we have the premise. Okay, the premise indicators. Words like since, because, for, as, given that, in as much as, and then for the reason that. These indicate premises. Okay, so we look at the different types of argumentation. This can actually this varies. This varies on depending on which resource you are actually reading. So you may not have like you may not really find these types of argumentations across different textbooks. That for you to perhaps understand the different types of argumentation, you may need to know um, what is the purpose of the argumentative uh, piece, for example, or speech. Is it about persuading people? Is it about negotiating? Is it a debate? Is it a moral argumentation? Is it about explaining um, the causal and effect relationship? Is it evaluating? Is it providing an analogy? So this perhaps is what you can base on to understand the different types of argumentative pieces of writing or even speeches. Um, when we look at the structuring of arguments, we can come up with different types of arguments. For example, we can have categorical syllogism, and then we have prepositional logic, inductive or induction, and then an analogy, and then abductive reasoning. We'll look at each of these perhaps. Often, in the different resources that you read, you have mainly two types of arguments, that is deductive and then inductive arguments. But of course, we have seen in our previous slide that may have different categorization, such as the abductive arguments. So deductive arguments are the ones which follow logically from the premises. So if the premises are actually correct, then the conclusion must be correct. Okay. So if the conclusion is not correct, I mean, if the premise is not correct, it is not possible that you will get a correct conclusion. Those are what we call deductive arguments. And then inductive arguments are the ones in which there is, if the arguments, if the premises are probably correct, then it is probable that the conclusions are also correct. Okay, so for example, if you say that most South Sudanese speak Arabic and John is a South Sudanese, it is likely that John actually speaks Arabic. So the thing is that there is no certainty. It is just likely or it is just probable. Whereas for deductive, it is the key word was a must. If the conclusion, if the premise is correct, then the conclusion must be correct. It is not possible to have a correct premise and then have a wrong conclusion. It's okay. Ija ina nilo chaje. Mm-hmm. Let me just continue. So categorical syllogisms consist actually of three categorical prepositions, of which two are actually premises, and then the third one is a conclusion. So if, for example, we say that all men are mortal, and then Socrates is a male, it is therefore concluded that Socrates is mortal. Okay, so this is what we call categorical syllogisms. So prepositional logic is when we actually analyze arguments based on their structure. Um, so if we actually base this on on uh, on on the nature of the statements, on whether they're actually correct or false. So it doesn't focus a lot on the content of the argument, but it focuses on the structuring of the argument. So, for example, if you say it is raining, and then the streets will be wet, and therefore, if you say that it is raining, most definitely that the streets will actually be wet. So, regardless of what we will replace that kind of statement with, um, we actually can conclude uh, on the nature of the argument based on its form, and we can therefore make proper conclusions based on that. Induction and analogy. This is what happens is that you can make a general conclusion based on specific observations that you have made. That is what we call induction. And then an analogy is when you compare two things that are alike and then argue that they are actually similar also in other aspects. Abductive reasoning is a type of argumentation that actually concludes that the best explanation for a given set, uh, like for you to reach a particular conclusion, uh, abductive reasoning focuses on how people reach a particular so abductive reasoning focuses on how people reach the best explanation for a given set of observations. So how do people, how does an individual reach a particular uh, uh, conclusion on the best possible explanation for a particular set of data? Rhetorical analysis. Often people engage in argumentation for purposes. If people are engaged in the people are engaged in argumentation for purposes of persuading people to believe what they actually say. So rhetoric is the art of persuasive communication. So it uses a lot of uh, it involves a lot of style, a lot of language. Rhetoric is a technique of using communication to influence people. So it means that one has to use language that is persuasive in style and that people can actually believe what is being said. And then we move to appeals to ethos, pathos, and logos. Like in argumentation, there are things that are expected of you. You should be very credible and you should be a person who has authority over a matter that you're actually discussing, that is ethos. And then with pathos, it refers to your ability to appeal to people's emotions in ensuring that you actually persuade them to your side of, to your point of view. And then logos is concerned with ensuring that the reasons that you give are actually logical. So you appeal to people's logic. So in argumentations, there are a number of techniques that you actually need to learn to be able to be effective. Uh, so techniques such as counter arguments, um, when a given argument is made, you can counter it. So you can attack the argument by giving opposing views or data that is contradictory uh, to the initial argument. Rebuttals are responses to objections. Okay, so if someone refutes your argument, you still uh, also again respond to, uh, to the arguments that have been fronted. Um, and then the other technique is one which you have just explained, is that the reasons and evidence should actually be able to logically link up with the claim that is actually being made. This is very, very important. The reason should be logical. So, in conclusion, this presentation has actually focused on the importance of argumentation and how you can actually use proper argumentation techniques to be able to influence people, people's opinion, or even to be able to persuade people to rally on your side. Thank you very much.